Welcome back into Live Now. The U.S. military will deploy additional fighter jets and Navy warships to the Middle East, the Pentagon said on Friday, as Washington seeks to bolster defenses following threats from Iran and its allies, Hamas and Hezbollah. Tufts University visiting assistant professor and Israel Institute fellow Dr. Alon Burstein joins us. Alon, as always, good to see you. This is a weekend that you and I are going to be watching very, very closely. What specifically has Iran said about its potential next move so far?
Good to see you, Austin. So we've had a lot of leaks coming out of Iran with regards to how it is going to formulate its response. Iran is responding to the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh that happened in Tehran, and Iran's in a bit of a bind. On the one hand, it needs to retaliate in order to save face. This happened in the Iranian capital. It happened in a hotel that's practically run by the Iranian Revolutionary Guards. And the way this happened was a bomb that was planted in the hotel. It's a huge embarrassment. So Iran needs to retaliate on the one hand. On the other hand, unlike what we saw in April, there was no recognized attack that occurred on a quote-unquote Iranian soil like in April it was in the consulate in Syria. Instead, this is, an anonymous attack. I mean, pretty obviously the Mossad of Israel did it, but Israel's not taking responsibility. It's not an Iranian even who was killed. So Iran's in a bind of how it retaliates. What we've heard is that, first of all, the supreme leader of Iran, Ali Khamenei, has ordered Iran to retaliate personally, not just to activate the militias, but to retaliate itself. In other words, we're looking at another attack that may resemble what we saw in April, which was the first time in history that Iran actually attacked Israel instead of doing it through proxies. Then we had a leak that came out of Al Ahbar, which is a Lebanese newspaper affiliated with Hezbollah, that said that within Iran, there's basically two responses right now that are being debated. One is to have a coordinated attack from Iran and all of the affiliates. So Iran, Hezbollah, the Houthis, Khatib Hezbollah, the different militias that are in Iraq, all may be launching some sort of coordinated attack. Again, mostly meant to surprise or cause some damage to Israel on the one option. Another option is to have more staggered attacks, to let the retaliation, so to speak, be prolonged. Iran can launch an attack, then maybe we'll see Hezbollah launching an attack, then maybe the Houthis later. Those are the two debates that are happening within Iran right now. Iran has vowed they're going to retaliate. How they're going to retaliate is what's being debated right now.
So you brought up something that I wanted to ask you about, because this is the first time I've talked with you since we found out how he was killed. As you mentioned, it was by an explosive device that had been planted in advance in a bedroom that he was in at the Iranian government official residence in Tehran. Israel carried out a high-profile strike on a top Hezbollah commander that day as well. That led you and I, Alon, to believe that the two incidents were a part of the Israelis making a statement about their capabilities. Now that we know that the Haniyeh bomb was planted well before he was killed, could it have been merely a coincidence that he walked into that bedroom on that day, or is it not so much a coincidence?
I'd say that Israel seized an opportunity because of what we were saying back then, on the day of the assassination.
Yeah.
Because it fit to have a regional retaliation. One of the things that we've learned is that Ismail Haniyeh liked this hotel. He liked this hotel room. This is a hotel that the Iranian Revolutionary Guards often hosted prominent VIPs. We know that Ziad Nahallah, the leader of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, was in the next door room. So clearly the Iranian Revolutionary Guards maintain this place as where they host high-profile leaders. Ismail Haniyeh specifically liked this room. According to reports, he actually always asked to stay in this room for months on end. So he's been staying in this room. It's something that Israel, again, I'm allowing myself to say Israel, even though Israel did not claim it. It's something that Israel had been planning for a long time. When to execute the plan? That would be the question. Israel could have done this. Ismail Haniyeh was in Tehran a couple of months ago too. He will be in Tehran, or he would have been in Tehran, likely next month also. Israel was going to carry out the attack when it saw fit. And for that, you have to have two things come together. It has to, first of all, be an appropriate time, so to speak, so you can sell it. For example, If Israel would have done this, let's say there was already a deal that was going to be signed, the sides agreed, and it's going to start next week. If you then carry out the assassination during that week, you would be seen as torpedoing the deal. You may have been planning the assassination for months. It doesn't matter. You now torpedoed the deal. So when it would be carried out is, first of all, when you can sell it, and then when you can seize the opportunity that if there's a retaliation, you can withstand it. Both those things came together now. Israel's prepared for regional escalation. It's a quote unquote convenient time for Israel to have this escalation. All of its air defenses are prepared. They're ready for Hezbollah's retaliation. And because of this regional escalation, because of what happened in Majd al-Shams, Israel could sell it internally and externally, saying Israel needed, quote unquote, to strike back at the regional actors, and it did so. So those things came together. I think Israel seized an opportunity to carry out that operation.
Taking a live look at the Gaza skyline right now. We are, as I said, watching the Middle East all weekend closely. You and I were on the air together back in April when Iran launched that barrage of missiles directly at Israel. That was a retaliatory attack as well. Those missiles were either intercepted or simply didn't make it all the way to Israel. It may very well have been designed to fail in order to prevent further escalation. Alon, does it feel like something similar to that could happen this time around, or does it feel different this time around?
It seems like it's going to be a little bit different. First of all, intelligence estimates are that Iran would like to carry out something more. I mean, I'll look for a different word, but I'll just say deadly, right? You know, that attack was very, very performative. We saw between 300 to 400 projectiles of ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and drones that were launched, photographed, forgive me, photographed beautifully. Like we were watching them live in the air, being intercepted. There's pictures of them above the skies. Iran could say, look at our retaliation, look how many missiles were fired. And in that sense, it was performative. Intelligence reports suggest that Iran would like to do something more assertive this time, possibly more deadly. Maybe, it's a little bit embarrassing almost for Iran that the Houthis managed to detonate a suicide drone in the heart of Tel Aviv and Iran did not. So in that sense, Iran would probably like to do something a little bit more deadly. All estimates, though, still suggest that neither Iran nor Hezbollah want a full-on escalation. And I'll tell you where I'm reading that between the lines is in the speech that Hassan Nasrallah gave. Among others, Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, said in his speech where he said, we're entering a new phase of the war. Israel needs to be prepared. We're going to make the Israelis weep for what they did. He also added, though, a very important line in which he said, and the level of our retaliation will be dependent on how Israel responds, which is saying, again, it's this tacit signaling, we're not breaking the rules of the game. We may launch now a bunch of missiles, but how far this goes is up to you. You can choose how deadly you retaliate to that, and then will we be in a full-on escalation or not? But as far as we're concerned, we're not there yet. So that, coupled with a couple other things, lead me to suggest that there will be a response. Iran will probably want it to be slightly more, quote unquote, successful than the April operation, but probably not an all out breaking the bank, full on regional war. What's going to be very interesting to track during this retaliation, whatever, if it's something similar, if it's still, again, projectiles from the sky, is going to be the regional Arab countries, because there was a lot of cooperation, to some extent, some surprising cooperation of regional Arab countries in intercepting those projectiles in April. We saw Israel and the United States, but we also saw Jordan actively shooting down missiles. That's something that gets them in trouble with Iran, but they did that openly and proudly. They acknowledged that, not clandestinely. Then we saw the United Arab Emirates also shooting down missiles. We even saw Qatar not admit that they participated, but all kinds of leaks suggesting that they at least allowed their radars and their satellites and whatever intelligence to be used by the coalition. All this was part of intercepting Iran then. I would dare say it's not going to be as easy now, because now the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh is a little bit different than what happened in April. Now, most of those countries condemned Israel for the assassination. It's seen as an assassination in a on foreign soil. It's seen as something that violates diplomatic rules and regulations. So in that sense, it'll be very interesting for me to see, will this be Israel and the United States defending the skies of Israel? Or again, are we going to see this regional alliance? And what does that tell us about the regional developments and alliances and sort of the map of alliances and power plays as they are.
Yeah, as I mentioned at the top, the U.S. has said that they're going to be bolstering their capabilities in the region. What exactly have we heard on that front?
So we've heard that the United States has sent, if I'm not mistaken, 12 more ships
Yeah.
into the area, including the USS Theodore Roosevelt, an aircraft carrier. And I think I saw at least two ships, each carrying 4,000 Marines. On the one hand, that is a very strong force. On the other hand, again, to some extent, this is more performative. This is more showing. In the event of full on regional war, this is not going to be all the US sends into the area. The US has countless bases throughout the Middle East. The US has very strong alliances with Israel and Egypt and Jordan and Qatar and the United Arab Emirates. And they also have a lot of interest in Iraq. The United States, if full on regional war were to blow up, World War III going on in the Middle East, these 12 ships are far from the last that we're going to see involved in this. What this is a display of force. What the United States, I think, is relying on is the fact that previously this has proven effective. On October 8th, October 9th, when it seemed like the entire Middle East, when we were on the brink of that World War III breaking out, right after October 7th, the IDF was not performing slash was non-existent. It was failing to defend Israel's borders. Hezbollah was mobilizing the full-on war. The United States is the one that immediately sent two aircraft carriers into the region, sent several more destroyers into the region, and openly said to Hezbollah, if you attack Israel, you're fighting a war with us. And they also threatened, interestingly, the Syrian regime and said to Iran, if you launch war with Israel, we're going to take down the Syrian regime. That was successful. That was, I would argue, largely what prevented Hezbollah from joining the war at that time. So I think the United States is relying again on this performative show of force to say, yes, we're almost letting you play. We're letting the actors do what they do here. You can have your retaliation, but don't go too far, I think is what the United States is trying to show with that display of force.
You have been following this most recent iteration of the war so closely. What patterns have you picked up on over the months to indicate what time of day potential attacks tend to happen?
Most attacks happen at night in the Middle East for a variety of reasons. Most of all is that it's easier to move heavy equipment. So a lot of these rocket launchers, and again, most of the war right now, from at least the side of the terror groups and to some extent Iran, is being fought with rocket launchers, drones. A lot of these, especially the heavier equipment, requires active mobilization, active moving a truck with a missile, firing a big drone, an important drone, requires actually moving a drone to an area. It's very different than the rockets that Hamas launches or the short range rockets that Hezbollah launches that can be planted months in advance and then set off with a telephone call or with a fuse. So, in order to bypass radars, bypass all kinds of things like that, most of these attacks tend to happen at night. There is a strategic advantage that Iran might try to use attacking on Saturday, like October 7th. You know, it's a Sabbath in Israel. It's the country is more shut down, so to speak. So it could happen then. But one of the things also that we've seen in the war is that the different actors are trying to surprise. They're constantly trying to surprise the other one, obviously starting with October 7th. But then we see this in different ways. The fact that Israel, for example, assassinated the number two in Hezbollah, Fuad Shukr, not the leader, but taking out as close as you get, is to some extent an escalation and saying, we're willing to surprise you. Usually assassinations go for the head. The assassinations go for Ismail Haniyeh. They go for the leader of the group. And saying, you know, almost got you. We actually like we can go for the deputy and also cause a lot of disarray in your group in your movement. Different sides are trying to one up the other one by surprise. So it's very likely that we will see Iran trying to surprise. We saw, for example, the Houthis, one of the things that they did, again, interestingly, as part of the psychological warfare, after they fired that drone that managed to detonate in Tel Aviv, they put out a message that mimicked word for word the messages that the IDF puts out in Gaza when it calls on Palestinians to evacuate an area. And they said they call upon the residents of Tel Aviv to evacuate Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv is now declared a war zone. If you stay, you are a liable target. Obviously, that's not true, but that's psychological warfare. Each side is trying to learn the other one and trying to figure out how to catch the other one off guard. So the pattern would tell us it would probably be at night. There's a strategic advantage at night, Middle East, of course, so more in daytime here. Strategic advantage to doing it over Saturday, but at the same time, Iran wants to try to surprise. So it may all of a sudden happen in daytime. One of the things that I would not have predicted in April is that Iran would have fired missiles towards Jerusalem. I would have bet good money they would not do that. Jerusalem is the third holy city in Islam. There are pictures of missiles being intercepted above the Al-Aqsa Mosque. So Iran was capable of surprising then, not doing what's expected. Obviously remains to be seen.
Alone, just to put it in context for the viewers, Israel time would be roughly 7 hours ahead of Eastern time. Do I have that correct?
Yes, it's 7 hours ahead of Eastern time and 10 hours ahead of Pacific time.
Pacific time. And I believe the last time Iran struck Israel directly, correct me if I'm mistaken, and maybe you know this, maybe you don't, I believe that was a Saturday as well.
I think so. I'm pretty sure we were on a Saturday. Again, it makes sense. The big wars in which Israel was caught off guard, the 1973 war, is known in Israel as the Yom Kippur War. It happened on Yom Kippur. It's the holiest or one of the holiest days in Judaism, but certainly the day that Israel shuts down. It's the equivalent of launching a big thing on Christmas Day. The country's mostly shut down. On October 7th was the last day of the Jewish high holiday, Simchat Torah. It was a Saturday. In Israel, there's a tendency that these days the country is less prepared. Most soldiers, or whatever soldiers can be spared, are sent on vacation. They're sent home to family. So there's a tendency to do that. And again, it's also part of the psychological warfare. It's part of on the day of rest, on the day you don't expect, that's when things happen. So likely we would see that. Possibly we'll see that tomorrow. There are a lot of rumors that the United States is almost expecting it to be this weekend. But it's also very possible that Iran's going to wait on purpose, going to say, you're expecting that? Good. Keep your guard up. We'll attack you next week. Like, Iran may want to do that as part of their psychological warfare. One more thing I'll add. We have to also consider Iran's internal politics. Iran has a new president. Ismail Haniyeh was in Iran for the inauguration of this new president. He has other things to worry about that he does not want a regional war on his head right now. Iran's economy is doing very badly, and it is very likely that he wants this retaliation, but he's also struggling to find a way to not let it hurt the Iranian economy more. So it's also something to consider.
I was going to ask, and you just touched on it. Everybody seems to be kind of looking at this weekend, and there's been nothing out there to confirm that something will, in fact, happen this weekend. My question for you, though, it's within the realm of possibility that nothing happens at all, correct?
It is.
Not this weekend only, by the way, but just nothing, period.
It is. One of the things that that we've seen in this back and forth, we saw this in Israel's retaliation to Iran. Israel attacked Iran, or the Iranian consulate, on April 1st. Iran carried out its retaliation 2 weeks later. It took a time on April 15th. And then Israel formally never retaliated to a massive attack on its territory. Now, once again, obviously it did. Obviously, the attack on Isfahan that happened shortly after that, where Iran's nuclear facilities, the air defenses around them were attacked, clearly that was Israel. But Israel never took responsibility for that. That was a way of de-escalating. That was a way of saying, FYI, we can get you, but we're not going to acknowledge that so you don't have to answer back. It is very possible that Iran would not launch a major offensive now, and instead would carry out a massive clandestine terror attack against a Jewish target, against an Israeli target, somewhere in the world, 2 months later, 3 months later, and call it, and then publicly acknowledge that is the retaliation. That is the response. That is very likely. I will say that the fact that the supreme leader of Iran openly said that he ordered Iran to retaliate directly kind of puts Iran in a bind. It does need almost to do something. But again, Iran could very well say that its retaliation was an explosion that occurred in an Israeli embassy in a month from now. So yes, it is very possible that we will not see such a public display of something. These high-profile assassinations, though, are putting these organizations in, again, I say very much quote-unquote, almost in an embarrassing situation where the leaders are being assassinated either of Hezbollah in Beirut or of Hamas in Tehran. So right now, in terms of the power play, they're looking not as good as they were at other times. So they may want to do a public display of force. But yeah, we've been wrong before in trying to analyze how the different actors work. So, like I always say, it remains to be seen.
It does remain to be seen. Alon, as always, we appreciate your time. Joining us, by the way, from the East Coast, congratulations on your new position at Tufts University. We miss you here on the West Coast, but we'll be speaking with you very soon, and we always look forward to your daily YouTube uploads. Take care, Alon.
Thank you, Austin. Good to see you.
All right, let's slide away for a quick break. We're back in 2 minutes.